timer starts now. Hello and welcome to MediumSalt, the really long podcast that makes shorter podcasts tremble when we talk about nostalgia and movies and how that shapes us as individuals and as a society. I am one of two hosts today. I go by Matt, and I am joined by my very dear friend, Kait. Today, we are going to be trying out a lighter format, a light salt, if you will, and we will be talking about the mythic Bechdel test. What is it? Where does it come from? How might we think about it? Does it know things? Let's find out.
Hey, Matt.
But first, Kait, how are you?
I am actually I'm very tired. I was going to say pretty okay, which I think I say every week. I am pretty okay. I'm also pretty tired.
Pretty okay most days.
I'm excited about pretty okay. Pretty okay is the new fine. So
pretty okay is the new fine.
It is. Tell all your friends. I'm excited to try this new lighter format, if only to ease up your editing work. And also because every time I try to get people to listen to my podcast and then I tell them it's 3 hours long, their faces drop. So
yeah, we do tend to be a little long-winded. So in order to help with that and to give us some semblance of personal lives, every other week we're going to be doing these light salt episodes. And we actually set a timer to restrict ourselves to a reasonable amount of time. Right now it's set for 45 minutes. Let's see if we can hold to that.
It's just still longer than
it's still longer than a lot. Our light episodes are the length of a regular podcast episode.
You know what? I won't apologize.
No. We have things to say.
Yeah. And I get to talk to one of my best friends for 3 hours every week, so that sounds good to me.
You reading any good books lately, Kait?
I have not been reading. It has been a weird couple of weeks. I know. I have been drawing a lot, though, because I'm doing Inktober. So basically, in the evenings, I will sit and draw for 5 or 6 hours, and that does not leave a lot of time for reading. Oh, but I did get a really interesting... so I'm subscribed to Nautilus, which is a long-form science magazine, and their issue I don't remember if it's quarterly or not, but their most recent issue is about the ocean, and the covers just these beautiful drawings of octopi, which are my favorite animal. And so I have been reading some articles about that. I learned a lot about manta rays. Do you know that manta rays are apparently responsible for bringing a lot of nutrients to coral reefs? They're one of the few things in the ecosystem because they travel so far. They will eat somewhere else and then they will, shit on the coral reefs. And then the coral reefs are like delicious.
Wonderful. That's that
they're very important. Right, exactly. I mean, honestly, manta rays are beautiful. They can poop on me. It's fine.
That's a different podcast, Kait.
Oh, yeah. What about you? What have you been reading? Tell me everything.
I've been like revisiting the Dune series. And I'm on like Heretics of Dune right now. I wanted to kind of read it before the new movie came out. It's a series that's like Dune as a book series and as the original book is very important to me personally. What it did for sci-fi as a genre and how it challenged and kind of subverted a lot of like narrative structure and tropes. To the point where I was like, oh, it's an unadaptable film. It'll never make a good movie.
Yeah.
But maybe, if it's gonna, after I saw Blade Runner 2049. Yeah, the new one, 2049 with Denis Villeneuve. I was like, if a director's gonna do Dune, I'm glad it's him. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I don't know if a lot of audiences will respond well to it because of the way Dune, if you're faithful to the book, it's going to be really unsatisfying if you aren't like a big like story junkie, like plot and plotting and story and structure, like how it all ties together. Which I love that stuff. I love just everything about how stories are told.
Even Blade Runner 2049, I saw that movie by myself in the theaters, and as I was leaving, I'm going to sound like a little old cranky lady when I say this, so I'm just going to put that out there. As I was leaving, I thought, wow, this movie was amazing. I went on to see it 2 more times in the theaters, and I've seen it several times since. And as I was walking out, there were like some maybe early 20s or late teens in front of me that were like walking down going down the escalator, and they were complaining about how long it was. And
go
how
eat your
slow
Tide
the movie
Pods.
was. go eat your Tide Pods and get out of my movies. But I was like, oh, I loved it. I loved the atmosphere and I don't know. I like long, slow things, clearly.
Yeah. Same. I feel
and I love Dune. I've never read any other Dunes in the series except for the first one. Because they're written by his son?
No, so there's like 6 books that are written by Herbert himself, right? Before his son kind of took over later, and he wrote a bunch of prequels and some sequels and blah, 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 blah. And a lot of people don't really consider that Dune canon because, like, it wasn't written by it wasn't the original guy, you know? It's not classic Coke. It's new Coke. But, reading the sequels was really weird for me. So when I first read them as a child, I hated them because they like, the first Dune was so epic and grand and like, yeah, it subverted some expectations and blah, 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 but it was still really entertaining. Loved it. And then the sequels like deconstructed the hero narrative further. Mm. And like, that was too far for me as a child to really, to get.
Yeah. Your healthy cynicism hadn't developed.
Yeah. Well, and just like my literacy, right? Like my own ability to understand the content I was ingesting. I later went and reread them as an adult, and I found a whole new appreciation for the series and the sequels that I didn't have before. And I think anybody who maybe read the sequels before, like once, and didn't really care for them, I would encourage you to maybe like learn a little bit more about what he was trying to do, and then read them again and see how you feel. Because when you understand kind of what he was doing with the Messiah narrative, it becomes a lot more interesting. And if you just want to like get a Cliff Notes version and learn more about Dune, there's a YouTube channel called Quinn's Ideas. And like that channel was built on Dune content, and that guy loves Dune. Highly recommend his channel. Ooh, everything Dune is fantastic. Yeah, he does other sci-fi stuff too. Like he does some Asimov and some like the Foundation trilogy and all that. Mm-hmm. And then he did like Hyperion. He covered some videos on Hyperion.
Hyperion.
Yeah. So great channel. Highly recommend. And that's what I have to say about Dune.
Yeah, it's nice when stuff like that holds up. Like sometimes I'll go back and revisit things that much like this podcast, I guess, but books that I loved as a child. So recently at Half Price Books, I found a whole bunch of the Xanth series from Piers Anthony.
Oh,
and
I
got a couple of them, and then I took them home and I started reading them. No. I didn't make it through the first 100 pages. I'm gonna preface this. I love books. I treat books with some sort of, as if they're like sacrament, you know? I don't like it when people dog ear books. I don't write in my books. I get really sad if my books get messed up. Yeah.
Books are sacred. All books are sacred.
Books are sacred to me, yeah. I threw these books in the trash because I did not want anyone else to read them. No. Like, I just threw them in the fucking trash because I think I was even more mad because I had liked them so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, they were magical and interesting and weird, but there's literally a character in, like, one of the main characters in the series where she's a woman and she goes through phases where she's actually super hot and dumb. And then she progresses over the course of the month to being super ugly and smart. And she just does that constantly. She's always in one of the, like, moving into or out of one of those phases. And that's just subtle. One part, like one tiny bit of, like subtle as a fucking firework. I'm like, wow. So all of it's just.
Yeah. Anthony is one of those.
The misanthropy is just weaved in there.
Xanth did not age great. Maybe we should cover books sometime and not just movies.
It'll be a tangent, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, so I'm glad that Dune, I need to go back and reread Dune.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, we should probably start talking about the Bechdel
We should.
test.
We've been talking about not the Bechdel test for about 10 minutes now, which is, that's precious. Precious time now with our new format.
Precious time.
So, Kait, what is the Bechdel test?
The Bechdel test has been talked about a lot lately. It has become, I want to talk about how it's perceived now and what it actually is. That's kind of important to me because that's really what I want to get across in this episode. So right now, when you hear the Bechdel test mentioned, it's almost like it's treated basically as a test for how feminist media is, right? The Bechdel test is actually a very simple set of questions. There are 3 things that have to be true. 2 women have to talk to each other in a film. They have to talk to each other about something that isn't a man. So 2 women have to be in a film. They have to they have to have a conversation, and the conversation has to not involve a man. It sounds like that would be very easy to accomplish, but only about half of a movie's pass.
Yeah.
That being said, right now, like there are a lot of criticisms about the Bechdel test, and we can go over some of them. But the point that I want to be taken away right now from this is this test came about. It was originally basically created by Alison Bechdel, who is an author, and it was published in her 1985 comic strip, Dykes to Watch Out For. And so it was originally inspired by Virginia Woolf.
Oh.
Virginia Woolf has this quote in A Room of One's Own, and I'm going to read it just because it's a really good quote, and Virginia Woolf's great. So this is what Virginia Woolf said. All these relationships between women, I thought, rapidly recalling the splendid gallery of fictitious women, are too simple, and I tried to remember any case in the course of my reading where 2 women are represented as friends. They are now and then mothers and daughters, but almost without exception they are shown in their relation to men. It was strange to think that all the great women of fiction were, until Jane Austen's day, not only seen by the other sex, but seen only in relation to the other sex, and how small a part of a woman's life is that. So basically, she's saying why is it that all of these, like she's actually just talking about books, right? Why is it that all of these media representations of women are so shallow or are only seen to elevate or season the narratives of men, right? Yeah. And so when we're talking about the Bechdel test, Alison Bechdel did not intend for this to become a huge feminist test icon, for films to be judged by. She was making a cultural commentary on the fact that even this very simple set of questions does not happen in a lot of movies.
Right. Like it's a really low bar to pass. Right.
Right. It also is not that informative.
No, it's not.
Yeah. So one of the criticisms is basically like, what does a conversation even mean? Actually, the Baby Got Back song by Sir Mix-a-Lot technically passes the Bechdel test.
Yeah.
Because there's a part where Becky says, "Oh my God, Becky, look at her butt." That is just one woman talking to another woman.
About a woman.
About someone's butt. Yeah. But my favorite movie of all time, well, okay, it's not my favorite movie of all time, but it's in my top 10. The Shawshank Redemption does not pass.
Right, yeah.
True Lies passes. True Lies passes the Bechdel test. Twilight passes the Bechdel test. So passing or failing the Bechdel test does not mean you're a feminist movie, right? It does not mean that you represent women well. It's literally just a question to make you think about the narratives that we give women in film and in media, right? And it's the fact that A, this came about in 1985, and B, our ability to evaluate media has not grown or changed. We're still using this very simple, oh no, we got to have women in this movie talking to each other or we won't pass and the feminists will be angry.
Right. And I think the joke of that original comic strip was how low that bar was to pass and how few films passed it. And like,
right?
I feel like a lot of like amateur, just internet film critics and stuff, just like guys making comments on boards and Reddit and whatnot. Like they look at the Bechdel test and they're like, oh, this is like the litmus test for whether a movie is feminist or not. But it's like, no, that's the point of the comic was that it's not. You know, the point, like, yes, a film could
Right.
pass this and still be terrible for a woman. And it's like, it's not a strong test. It's a weak test. And like, you can't have a litmus test for whether or not your film is like a good good representation for women. It's like, how about you just make a good film? Like, make a good film.
Yeah. And like, even the fact that they're trying to find a test. I mean, the Bechdel test did spawn off a lot of other tests, which I will talk to you about right now if you'd like. So we have like the Mako Mori test, which was inspired by Pacific Rim, which is really just, does the female character have an independent plot arc that doesn't just support a male character's plot arc? So now we're actually having more of a thinking sort of test, right? It's not an easy yes, no. And then one of my favorites is the sexy lamp test.
My favorite is actually the variant of that, which
what's the variant of that?
Moneypenny in James Bond would be considered the sexy lamp with a post-it note, because they can be replaced, because like their point in the film is not just to look beautiful, but to convey plot information to the main character. So you could replace Moneypenny with a sexy lamp with a post-it note full of information on it.
I love it so much. So the sexy lamp test, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically, if you replace the character with a sexy lamp, does your story go off the rails at all? And if the answer is no, rewrite your fucking story. So it spawned a bunch of other sort of similar tests in different minority and disenfranchised groups, right? So you have some LGBT, you have indigenous people tests that have sprung up, people of color. So a lot of people were inspired by the Bechdel test to try to answer those questions for their own groups as well, which is really interesting. One of my favorites, though, and I'm just saying this because I work in tech, there's also nonfiction related tests, and one of them is it's, I don't know if it has a name, but it's basically a Bechdel test for software. So in order to pass the Bechdel test for software, the source code passes if it contains a function that was written by a woman developer that calls another function that was written by a woman developer.
Oh, snap.
And that just tickles the crap out of me. Yeah.
Oh dear.
So you can expand this into a lot of different things, but I think the thing that I really want to come away with, or everyone to come away with, is basically like, we need better ways to evaluate media, and it's not a yes/no answer.
Yeah,
right?
no, that's the important thing. I think that's like shows the weakness of these litmus tests of like, does a thing pass this one criteria? Oh, then it's okay. It's like, life is messier than that. Things are fudgier, and it's weird. And like, this is important, and it's like, life imitates art and all that, stuff, and how we represent humans to other humans is important, because it does shape the way we think, even though, as I've covered before, you shouldn't, because people who make media are fucking weirdos.
Yeah, but we don't have control over...
No, we don't, but
like,
we should think about, like, it needs to be thought about, right?
Absolutely.
And women really, really need to be, all people need to be represented better in our media.
This goes for men as well. You don't see a lot of healthy representations of men being vulnerable or emotional or having, feelings or getting their needs met or things like that,
Oh, yeah. And toxic masculinity is a common problem in films.
Right.
And I think the point of all of this is that, whatever your own political leanings or whatever, like, it's important that you look at representation in media as like not some pointless SJW woke scolds, like, aggressive thing. It's just something that we really need to think about, because, despite making up more than 50%, it's just over 50% of the population, like, women represent a fraction, like a minimal fraction of strong characters we see in our stories, and societies are shaped very much by the stories they tell.
Yeah, storytelling is one of the oldest cultural artifacts of humankind, right? Like, you could even argue maybe that's what separates us from animals. Like, we we are storytellers at heart. And when you're a young girl and you only hear stories about men being great or the things like, you start to build in these limitations for yourself, whether or not you realize it. And then at some point, if you're lucky, something happens or someone happens and you start to dismantle those, but then it takes extra work to even just get anywhere. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we bottom line is just, we need better representation. People need to think of women as not, this is the problem with like women and other minorities. They're thought of as like they're othered very much in media, right? Like they become the other because they're not, there's this thing where like there's the cishet white male is just like the standard and everything else is a deviation from standard, but that's just not true at all.
Right. They're normal. I hate the word normal, but it's normal, quote unquote.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like white males aren't the standard. I mean, not even by just numbers, like white male is not the standard, not in the US. There are more non-white males than there are white males. So
there just shouldn't be a standard, right? Humankind is a beautiful tapestry of a bunch of weirdos, right? Like we just have so many different stories to tell. And everyone, like we're in a phase right now where you hear a lot about how representation matters and the increase of streaming allows for a lot more nuanced media to be produced.
Yes.
But sometimes it can be lost in the corporate nature of it.
100%.
And when we say representation matters, we need to also say why. And it's because we're human beings and we're all in this together and we should be lifting each other up and learning more about each other and developing empathy. Like I don't want people to put gay people in movies just to check a box.
No, because that doesn't, that doesn't do anyone any good.
Yeah, like recently, the Chappelle Show, Netflix published one of his stand-up specials or something. He's under a lot of fire because he has very strong anti-trans sentiments in it. And it's caused this whole thing. Like people from Netflix actually interrupted a meeting to protest it, and then they got fired. And it's just been this whole deal. And, Chappelle's stance on the whole thing is basically like, they're just being too whiny. It doesn't make any difference. It's just a joke, as if that hasn't been the narrative that we've used for hundreds of years to oppress people. It does matter. Like the trans community are very, very highly predated upon. The rates of violence against trans people is huge. Trans women, especially trans women of color, experience more violent crime against them than almost any other demographic. And the thing about it is, it's because of this otherness, right? If you maintain that otherness in life and in media, whenever you do find something, because we're humans, but we also have lizard brains, and we think, oh no, something is new and scary, we must crush it or whatever. It makes them just seem, unapproachable and unhuman, which isn't fair. But if you see them just represented normally in media, be it a Black person or a woman who wants a job or has any sort of narrative that isn't just, I'm an old woman or I'm a mother or I'm a sex object.
Right.
You actually develop that empathy.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's just, it is weird that our popular narratives are dominated by such a specific group of people. By just basically white males, right? Like, it's just weird that's given the tapestry and the multiculturalism that is the melting pot that is, the US. It is just really weird that is all we see represented in media. And I think we need to acknowledge that and, move forward. Some really interesting stories, they're told from outside the norm. Or the norm. I'm using the norm because that's what we currently...
It's hard not to, but...
some of my favorite stories right now that I'm consuming are basically, fresh voices because everything is so dominated. I'm really enjoying a lot of sci-fi written by Black women because they're so underrepresented. Like, for a lot of... One, they're amazing writers. But they're also, like, that voice is extremely underrepresented in the genre and in publishing. So like, it's nice, to get that other perspective. And I think it helps grow empathy. I think it helps a person grow as an individual.
Yeah. And isn't that the point of storytelling, right? So why is it that we can tell stories where we can imagine that we have superpowers, or we can imagine that we turn into cats, or we can imagine whatever crazy thing, but then you add a gay person and it's a hard stop, right? We cannot possibly imagine that. That is just too uncomfortable. Yeah. Like, yes, please. I want to watch a serial killer with hooks for hands and an alligator face destroy someone for 2 hours, but I don't ever want to see men kiss on screen. No, thank you.
Yucky. That's gross.
But ew. Yeah, this threatens my sense of comfort.
Yeah.
Which leads me to something else that I was thinking about this as I was driving today, because essentially the entire purpose of our current podcast is to analyze the change of not moral imperatives, moral acceptance. I can't think of the right noun.
The evolution of our social standards, our social morality.
Right. What we're willing to accept in film and media and that sort of thing. And one of the things that this is going to do is going to make people uncomfortable. And a lot of people are not, this is going to sound like a stupid sentence, but they're not comfortable being uncomfortable, right? In order to question these things, like, we're going to talk about movies that I like a lot, and it's going to hurt.
I think
like The Fifth Element.
Oh yeah,
I love The Fifth Element.
Well, I mean, the next thing on our recording docket is one of your was your favorite film as a child.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other bucket of worms that we'll get to. But
well, when we get to that, I think what we'll find is that it wasn't as bad as you think.
That's fair. But when we talk about this, I feel like it's important for us to also cultivate a feeling of forgiveness for ourselves, right? Like, you cannot judge past versions of yourself for participating in actions that you did not understand. What you can do and should do is take the things that you're learning now, have an open mind, listen when people say things like, no, this isn't okay, right? Yeah. When they have a perspective. And this still happens to me. Like, the other day, I made a joke to my friend, and I used it's one of those things that I didn't even consider being an issue, right? Like, I made some sort of joke, and I used a blaccent, which I didn't even realize was a word. And my friend said, oh, you really shouldn't. She said it in a very nice way, but she was like, you shouldn't use that. And I was like, oh my God, that's just in me. And it just came out without me thinking about it. Yeah. And I'm very grateful that she pointed it out, because I am like, oh my God, I do not want to do that.
I mean, I do the same thing with, I do the same thing with, in college and stuff. And afterwards, not so much, because I ran out of time, but I used to game a lot. Right. I used to play a lot of online gaming, Xbox Live, Halo, just to date myself. But, there was
Halo 1.
Yeah, Halo 1. But, there was definitely that gamer culture at the time. There was a lot of homophobic slurs and stuff used. And that was kind of a leftover from the 90s, I feel like. A lot of those words where you would use you'd use like the F word as like a derogatory term. And like it took a while of me, like, I lived on the internet entirely too much. I was on the internet.
Who didn't?
Way too much. And it was hard for me to separate like the game of it, the game and of the jokes and the fun with the actual like meaning of the game and of the harm it was doing. And that took some growing for me.
Yeah. It's not easy, right? Like, nobody wants to be the bad guy. And so our first response when someone tells us that we're doing something wrong, and it's something that we've been doing for a long time,
that's harmless,
is to be resistant. Yeah.
It's just a bit of fun.
Or to get angry, or to, it's just a bit of fun, or fuck you can't tell me what to do, or whatever. I don't, there's a wide variety of responses to it. And I think that that's normal, but I think it's also something that needs to be grown past.
Yes, absolutely. I don't, and it's like, and when it comes to media of stuff you used to enjoy, I think you can still go back and enjoy a lot of problematic media. I don't think anyone's saying that you shouldn't do that. But I do think it's good to go back with the context in mind and really understand what you're ingesting and like what is acceptable and unacceptable and why. Like, it's not enough to, you can't just say, oh, that thing stinks. Like, oh, that thing's bad because it had a lot of problematic views. It's like, it'd be better for you to understand why those things were problematic so that you can like empathize better with the people who were subject to it.
Yeah, I can see that. I definitely feel like I take a little bit harsher stance on it, and that could just be because I have a hard time ingesting a lot of the media that is like this. Like, I actually am having a hard time finding new shows to watch because I will come across something and be like, this is just too upsetting. I can't watch this. Yeah. And it's something that I normally would not have bothered me. Right?
I mean, that's fair. And the other thing too is like, I'm coming from a very cishet white male perspective where like I have the privilege to be like, whatever, doesn't affect me, you know? And I am very much aware of that.
Yeah. Maybe it's something like you need to treat it like something that's just a little bit poisonous. Right. You can't eat very much of it, right?
It's media be careful, junk food,
realize, right? Realize what you're doing. It's full of trans fats. Wow, that's actually kind of hilarious.
Oh no.
It's full of trans fat jokes is what it's full of, right? Like, it's just horribly offensive. I also think that we are much more susceptible to media than people are willing to admit.
Oh yeah.
Like, I think people think that they're above propaganda, but that's not how propaganda works, right? You develop these subconscious associations with things and these subconscious responses to things, and you can't control them, right? So the things you feed into yourself are things that are changing your internal landscape. And so when you do choose to ingest this media, you need to do it with a very critical eye.
Yeah. I mean, like anything that you ingest, you need to watch out. Like, bad food goes straight to your stomach or whatever, and bad media goes straight to the brain.
Yeah.
It's heavy stuff. And we started this talking about a silly little, do women talk to each other on a movie test?
Yeah. So let's see. What else can we say about the Bechdel test?
Well, there's some areas where it's really like weak. But again, that's the whole point, is that it is a weak standard. But like it does, a lot of people will include underage women, so girls, as
that's how True Lies passes.
As valid. And I feel like, well, no, that part shouldn't be valid because I want children to be children. I want them to talk about childish things. And if two little girls talk about childish things, then it passes the Bechdel test, even if like every other woman in the movie only talks about men.
It's also interesting because if it's a mother talking to her child, like in True Lies, then you're still just sort of pigeonholing the woman into
the mother role,
the standard role of you are allowed to be a mom, but that's it.
Yeah. But again, the whole point of the Bechdel test is to be a just stupidly low standard. So
yeah, it's a little bit tongue in cheek, and the fact that it has been taken so seriously is its own commentary on the views of women in media by the people who produce media. I do have a thing that I found really interesting, and I found a new person to hate. I tried to look up more about him, but I know, right? Exciting. I say hate, but I am saying it playfully. Like, hate is bad, hate. Etc. So in response to the Bechdel test, there was a man named Kyle Smith, who's a film critic, and he suggested that,
first of all, no serious critic should take the Bechdel test seriously. Like, it's pop culture baloney criticism. It's not real criticism. It's not scholarly criticism, I should say. It's real criticism. Everything's real, but it's not scholarly. It's not like there's not a framework of Bechdelianism, you know? Bechdel critical theory.
if the bulk of your commentary about women in film is just these 3 very simple questions, you have much larger issues. So the film critic Kyle Smith suggested that the reason for the Bechdel test results was that, so basically the test results being that only half of them pass, he said that Hollywood movies are about people on the extremes of society, cops, criminals, superheroes, which tend to be men. Such films, according to Smith, were more often created by men because, and I quote, women's movie ideas were mostly about relationships and, quote, aren't commercial enough for Hollywood studios. Yeah, he considered the Bechdel test just as... We will now take a Matt Groans break. Thank you. So he said he considered the Bechdel test just as meaningless as a test asking whether a film contained cowboys. I like that he couldn't even use an example about women. It had to be cowboys.
All those, all those, in real life, on my day-to-day, all those male superheroes, just so many men.
Cops and criminals. And
they're just like saving everybody, flying around everywhere. Yeah. I'm so sick of these flying penises everywhere. Give me some flying vaginas.
Right? And this is a man who reviews films for a living. And I'm like, why? The idea that women's ideas about movies or movies about relationships aren't commercial enough for Hollywood studios. Right. What? Like, it's not like women make up half the world and control lots of money and whatever. Not that should be the reason you do anything, but if we're going to try to convince capitalists to be on our side, at the very least, we can say, well, we'll make it real easy for you. Do something that attracts any of the other 50% of the world, and it'll be great.
It's not mainstream. It's not mainstream, Kate. It only appeals to 51% of the population.
Can't do it, yeah. But it's they don't count as real people, right? So, yeah. And then you have all right, J.K. Rowling.
Oh God, oh my God.
We're not going to talk about her as problematic as she is, but she wrote Harry Potter, right? Harry Potter, a huge and massive commercial success. Women can write stories, right? Yeah. That's not something that is limited to men. Also, women can be cops and criminals. My favorite villains are women. Oh, yeah. I love a good woman villain. And
who's your favorite woman villain? Put you on the spot.
Oh, that's really hard. All right, let's think about it. I actually really, really like Cruella de Vil.
Cruella de Vil. OG.
Mostly because of the new movie about Cruella.
Okay, I haven't seen the new movie.
Ursula is also one of my favorites because she's an octopus.
Ursula is an icon and designed after a drag queen, like the most famous drag queen. So.
Which is why she's so great.
Oh, so much fun and so much camp, and it's great.
Yeah, she makes that whole movie. But I think my most favorite villain of all time is Poison Ivy.
Okay, all right.
She starts off as a scientist, and then she gets mad, right? Like, she gets mad for good reasons. People are destroying the environment, and Poison Ivy was made ages ago, and it's still true, right? And so she's like, you know what I'm going to do? Turn into a crazy plant lady, check, and destroy a bunch of people, check, And my favorite villains are the ones that you kind of can't argue with,
okay,
right?
Yeah.
You're like, you know what I mean? Like, you're doing a bad thing, but also, like, you're right. The environment's important. You should save those wetlands.
Yeah.
Who is your favorite villain?
That's tough. I don't have like a stereotypical like super favorite. I'm very as a person, I'm very attracted to very competent people. Right. Mm-hmm. I like people who can get things done.
Ozymandias.
So like
what? He's a great villain.
He's pretty good. So I guess my favorite female villain, off the top of my head, I didn't really think about this hard enough before I asked you the question. But maybe Dr. Girlfriend from Venture Brothers.
Oh, I don't think I've ever seen that.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a fun little cartoon that pokes a lot of fun at the tropes of like, the 60s and 70s cartoons of the, in comic books and but just pop culture nonsense. It's a fun show. I think they finished it. I don't think they're making any more. But it was, it was hard to keep up with because the creators would only release a season like once every 4 years or something. Like it was impossible to keep up with the show. So like I haven't even seen most of the later seasons. I know, but Dr. Girlfriend is pretty fantastic. But I don't know if that should count because she's voiced by a man. And that's like part of the joke. And like, I don't know how I feel about that. I haven't gone back and examined that.
All right. Time for a rewatch.
Yeah. Maybe I need to go and examine that. But the reason I like Dr. Girlfriend is that she's very competent and doesn't let like men get in her way. And, just very like, doesn't let anyone get in her way, men or women. But
it's difficult to pick a female villain that's really good because a lot of times a woman just doing things for herself becomes a villain.
Yeah.
Right? Like a woman who doesn't want to be a mother so like look at the Devil Wears Prada, right? The villain of that movie is clearly oh my gosh. How could I forget her name? Meryl Streep.
Yeah.
Plays her.
Yeah, the character Miranda Priestley.
Miranda Priestley. Yeah. She's the villain of the story. But she is a complicated character, right? She's the head of a very, very hard and difficult magazine. She has a string of failed marriages. She really cares about her kids, but she doesn't have time to do it. And, she's the villain for having really exacting standards. And yeah, obviously she's difficult to work with and there are other issues with her and whatnot. But basically the idea that if you're a woman who doesn't want to fall into line, you're already a villain makes it more difficult to identify more nuanced villainy, right?
Speaking of villainy and women and what we're going to record for our Halloween episode are the witches and Hocus Pocus. They're pretty great. All three of them are so just wonderful.
They are. I am so excited about that episode. I think when we release all these, it's going to be out of order. So it's going to be fun.
I think like I'm actually thinking like, anybody listening is probably going to listen to this after the fact, but we're probably going to release Hocus Pocus first because it'll be right after Halloween. So it'll be good to release that. And then we'll release all the other ones we've recorded, including this one, even though we recorded this one before Hocus Pocus.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah. We'll have the 2 official watch orders. We'll have like the release order and the recorded order. Yes. And then people can fight online about what is canon.
Oh my god, I can't wait
Medium
until
salt
people fight
canon.
online about us. That'll mean we've made it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we'll just generate that hate and that love.
Yeah.
It'll be fantastic.
So the Bechdel test. I think that it was important at the time. I think it's also older than either of us. And I think that we need
absolutely
better ways to evaluate our media.
Yeah.
And I think when you watch something and you think about whether or not it is a good representation of other people, the important thing is this person like a standalone person? Can you imagine having a conversation in a coffee shop with this character? And what would they say, right?
Yes. And the Bechdel test should really be thought of as like a tongue-in-cheek punchline of a joke, because that's what it originally was. And the joke being everyone else, how terrible we are. Like the joke is like most films don't pass this stupid test that really doesn't tell us anything.
Well, I feel like it's also important to say that not every narrative has to be about women. Like that's not what we're asking for.
No.
Right. Like, so the Shawshank Redemption is a great example. Yeah. It takes place largely in a prison and is about a very specific subset of the population. And it makes sense that there are not a lot of women in this movie. And so it does not pass the Bechdel test, but it's a great movie. And it's very, it's a great story too. And we're not saying that we want to replace every narrative with a queer narrative or a female narrative. I mean, I think some people probably do because people want to see themselves in film, right? Like you don't want to watch a movie that doesn't portray anything that you care about, but also sometimes it might be a little bit of an overcorrection about the fact that largely film has been, like you said, controlled by and representing white men for the majority of history. And the pushback that we get from just adding even small characters to movies about, or games, God forbid, that white men want to consume is ridiculous, right? Like the arguments are, oh, well, I don't want to see such and such person, or I don't want to play as a woman. I'm not a woman. And I'm like, what about, like, what about are you fucking with me? Like, are you really this uninsightful? I don't understand.
Yeah,
like, this has to be a troll, but it's not. They're real people.
They're people who just like they never bothered to examine their own beliefs. And I think that's it. We have our timer went off.
Oh, hey, we actually did a pretty good job.
We covered the topic, which was good. I mean, we picked a pretty light topic for this first episode of Light Salt, so I think that was good. I know some of our other topics won't be so light, but I'm going to we'll try. We're going to do our best.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
I don't know if there's any good additional reading that you would suggest for the Bechdel test for anyone who's interested.
Yeah, I think that we're going to try to have a post for every episode to include some links and some resources to learn more. Like, there's actually a BechdelTest.com where you can go and see movies that pass. So, like, you can search. It's a searchable database created by users.
Wonderful.
And so, yeah, even just, links to, like, I very, very lightly mentioned some of the other tests that have sprung up about indigenous people, or there's actually like an Orthodox Jew one, things like that. I'll add some links to things about that too.
That's really neat. All right. Well, I think that'll do it for this week. Thanks for listening in to Medium Salt. Make sure to visit our website, MediumSalt.com, where you can subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating or a subscribe, a follow. If you tell a friend about the show, tweet about the show, call your mom about the show, maybe make some smoke signals, maybe some scribe writing. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You can check us out on Twitter at mediums_salt. Check us out next week. We're going to talk about a surprising film, Mrs. Doubtfire. Kait, shall you or shall I?
I feel like we need to say it at the same time.
Stay salty.
Have a great week, everyone.